When you're dealing with bass that are roaming around or covering big flats and have a nice gravel or hard bottom composition made up of small rock, this is something you're gonna want to keep ready. But one of the most often asked questions about a wobblehead is why choose this over a regular worm weight? Can it do the same thing? Well, I'm gonna show you specifically what each, the wobblehead and a traditional worm weight, does better or worse than the other, so you can grab the right setup for the situation. And you may have just found something that is not getting used by a lot of anglers on your home waters, and that is always a benefit this time of year when angling pressure is at its highest. Well, let's start with the wobblehead and what it does well. Now remember, the idea is to cover water and keep the lure scooting along. The wobblehead lets the bait move freely from side to side, which can add a little more action to it. Wobbleheads also work through rock crevices better. The football shape can make a noticeable difference, keeping the lure free of getting wedged. Can it still happen? Well, of course, but not as often as the more slender worm weight. Wobbleheads, because of their wider profile and bottom contact, give a nice silt trail as well. This can draw the attention of bass from a distance and pull them in to take a look, and I am always a big fan of any presentation that takes advantage of the natural curiosity of the bass by pulling them from a distance. And as I mentioned earlier, this is one presentation that not a lot of anglers have embraced, so that can be a huge advantage if your waters are just hammered with pressure every weekend. Now in this video, I'm using a craw, but Tommy Biffle made this famous with his Biffle bug, and a lot of great wobblehead anglers prefer to use baits with a slightly more slender profile. This is because the lure is moving almost constantly. So when that bass grabs it, we don't want it to get just a piece of the lure like an appendage. We want them to zero in and grab the whole thing. That is the idea behind a more compact profile plastic, but you can literally put any plastic you want on this setup and give it a try. Now, what does that wobblehead not do so great? Well, if your lake bed, even if you have rock, is like mine here with lots of junk on it, the wider wobblehead I find is more apt to grab something like a leaf or moss and not shake it free as easily. So the cleaner the rock you have, the better it will perform. Now let's compare this to a traditional worm weight. At first glance, the retrieve crawling along basically looks identical. And remember, when we're thinking about using something like a wobblehead, it is not a presentation that is the slow drag like we often associate with Texas rigs. It is a faster searching tool. A lot of anglers compare it to fishing a crankbait. You keep digging away and covering water. So I am retrieving the worm weight here the same as the wobblehead, just keeping it moving. And the biggest drawback, like I mentioned earlier, of a regular worm weight is the slender profile is more apt to wedge into rock crevices, which can be super annoying if you just made a huge cast and get it wedged between some rocks right away. But with that said, if the rocky bottom has some more muck and debris on it, the worm weight does free itself better than the wider wobble head. And if you have the weight unpegged, when you snap it up and over something, the lure is more apt to float back down slowly for a second. That's why I have a craw on here. And that sudden change of direction and speed can always be a powerful tool in triggering bass to bite. It is also important to note that if you are getting hung up a lot with the wobblehead or worm weight, downsizing can make a huge difference. Just something as simple as going from a 1/2 ounce to 1/4 ounce can make for a less frustrating retrieve if you are always getting stuck. Now, there are links below to the terminal tackle and different lures, as well as the link to the bass behavior bundle for those of you that love bass behavior videos and want to support the channel. Thank you so much. And hey, if you want to watch a video that covers different spinnerbait blades, gold and silver and painted blades, and what they're really doing at different depths, go ahead and check this one out right here. Make sure that you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.